The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the dusty general store, and Catherine Grace pressed her trembling fingers against the tiny silver mirror she kept tucked in her bodice, feeling the familiar cool metal against her skin like a talisman from another life. She had carried that mirror since she was 5 years old, the only thing her mother had given her before fever took her. And now, at 22, Catherine was stepping into a future as uncertain as the Nevada desert stretching endlessly beyond Unionville. The year was 1875, and Catherine had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Boston to marry a man she had never met, a rancher named William Patterson, who had promised her security and a home in his letters. But when she descended from the stagecoach, adjusting her traveling dress and squinting against the late afternoon sun, it was not William Patterson who waited for her. Instead, a tall man with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of storm clouds stood near the hitching post, his hat in his hands. He looked to be perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a jaw shadowed with several days of stubble. He did not approach her immediately, and Catherine felt the first cold fingers of dread creeping up her spine. Miss Grace. Another man, older and round-bellied, stepped forward instead. He wore a tin star pinned to his vest. "I'm Sheriff Garrett. I'm afraid I have some difficult news for you." Catherine's hand went automatically to the mirror again, seeking comfort in the familiar. "Where is Mr. Patterson?" The sheriff removed his own hat, twisting it in his hands. "There was an accident 3 days ago, miss. William was bringing some horses down from the high pasture when his mount spooked. He took a bad fall. The doctor did everything he could, but William passed yesterday morning." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Catherine reached for the stagecoach to steady herself, her fingers gripping the worn wood. She had known this was a risk, marrying a stranger, building a life on nothing but letters and hope. But she had not imagined arriving to find her future already buried. "I'm very sorry, miss," the sheriff continued. "William was a good man, well liked in these parts. If you need passage back to Boston, I'm sure the town can help with the fare." Back to Boston. Back to the boarding house where she had scrubbed floors and emptied chamber pots. Back to the city where every door had closed in her face, where being an orphan with no family and no prospects meant a life of servitude or worse. Catherine had burned those bridges when she left, telling Mrs. Henderson exactly what she thought of her constant criticism and wandering hands of her son. There was nothing to go back to. "I see," Catherine said, though her voice sounded strange and distant to her own ears. "Thank you for telling me, Sheriff." The tall man with the storm cloud eyes finally stepped forward. "Madam, my name is Harrison Oakes. I worked for William, helped him run his ranch. It's not my place to say, but you've come a long way, and there's no need to make any hasty decisions. William's ranch is still there. His sister is coming from Sacramento to settle his affairs, but that will take a few weeks at least. You're welcome to stay at the ranch until then. Give yourself time to figure out what you want to do." Catherine studied him, trying to read the intention behind his offer. Harrison Oakes had an honest face, she thought, though she had been wrong about people before. But what choice did she have? The few coins in her purse would not even buy her passage to the next town, let alone back to Boston. "That's kind of you, Mr. Oakes," she said carefully. "I would appreciate a few days to gather my thoughts." "More than a few days if you need them," Harrison said. He settled his hat back on his head and gestured to a wagon hitched nearby. "The ranch is about 5 miles north of town. I'll collect your trunk." The ride out to the Patterson ranch was quiet except for the creak of wagon wheels and the steady clip of the horses' hooves. Catherine sat on the bench seat beside Harrison, acutely aware of the solid presence of him, the way his strong hands held the reins with casual competence. The landscape around them was harsh and beautiful in equal measure, sagebrush and rocky outcroppings painted gold by the lowering sun. "William talked about you often," Harrison said after a long silence. "He was real excited about you coming. Had the house fixed up nice, bought new curtains and everything." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them back. "I wish I could have met him. He was a good boss, fair and decent, taught me everything I know about ranching." Harrison glanced at her, then back at the road. "If you don't mind me asking, what made you decide to come all the way out here? William never said much about your circumstances." Catherine considered how much to reveal. "There was nothing left for me in Boston. My mother died when I was young and I grew up in various situations, none of them particularly pleasant. When I saw Mr. Patterson's advertisement, it seemed like an opportunity for a different life." Harrison nodded slowly. "The West is good for that. Fresh starts." The Patterson ranch appeared as they crested a low rise. A sturdy house built of wood and stone with a barn, and several corrals spreading out behind it. It was larger than Catherine had expected, speaking to William Patterson's success as a rancher. Harrison drove the wagon right up to the front porch and climbed down, reaching up to help Catherine descend. His hands were warm and calloused as they briefly clasped her waist, steadying her as she stepped down. Catherine felt a flutter of something in her chest that she firmly ignored. This man was being kind to her out of respect for his dead employer. Nothing more. Inside, the house was indeed well maintained, with those new curtains William had bought fluttering at the windows. The main room held a stone fireplace, a sturdy table with chairs, and a rocking chair positioned to catch the light. Everything was neat and clean, almost painfully so, as if William had wanted to make the best possible impression. "The bedroom is through there," Harrison said, pointing to a door off the main room. "I've been sleeping in the bunkhouse with the other hand since William passed. Didn't seem right to be in the main house. There's food in the larder, and I'll bring fresh water from the well." "Thank you, Mr. Oakes." Catherine set down her small traveling bag and looked around, trying to imagine the life she might have had here. "You have been very kind. Just Harrison, please, and it's no trouble." He shifted his weight, clearly uncertain about something. "Miss Grace, I want you to know that you're safe here. The hands who work this ranch are good men, and I'll make sure they understand you're to be treated with respect." Catherine met his eyes and saw only sincerity there. "I appreciate that, Harrison, and please call me Catherine." He nodded, a small smile touching his lips for the first time. "Catherine, then. I'll leave you to settle in. If you need anything, the bunkhouse is just past the barn. I'll be back in the morning to check on things." After he left, Catherine stood alone in the house that should have been her home, feeling the weight of exhaustion and grief and uncertainty pressing down on her shoulders. She reached into her bodice and withdrew the tiny mirror, holding it up to catch the last rays of sunlight streaming through the window. The mirror was no bigger than her palm, the silver backing tarnished with age. She could barely remember her mother's face now, but she remembered her voice saying, "Keep this safe, Catherine. When you look in it, remember that you are loved." She had been 5 years old and sick with the same fever that would take her mother 3 days later. The mirror had been Catherine's companion through everything that followed, through the orphanage and the succession of positions as a maid and companion, through every hardship and disappointment. It was not valuable in any monetary sense, but it was hers, a connection to a time when she had been cherished. Catherine set the mirror carefully on the mantel above the fireplace and began to unpack her trunk. That night, she lay in the bed that William Patterson had prepared for his bride and stared at the ceiling, listening to unfamiliar sounds of the Nevada night. Coyotes yipped in the distance, and the wind whispered around the corners of the house. She thought about the strange turns of fate that had brought her here, and about Harrison Oakes with his storm cloud eyes and quiet kindness. Sleep came slowly, but when it finally arrived, Catherine dreamed of her mother's face and a tiny silver mirror catching the light. Morning came bright and early, sunlight flooding through the bedroom window. Catherine rose and dressed in one of her simpler day dresses, pinning her dark hair back from her face. She found coffee in the larder and managed to coax the stove into cooperation, grateful for the skills she had learned during her years of domestic work. She was standing at the stove, watching the coffee pot, when she heard boots on the porch. Harrison knocked politely before entering, his hat already in his hand. "Morning," he said. "I hope you slept all right." "Well enough, thank you." Catherine poured coffee into 2 tin cups and offered him one. "I am not sure what I should be doing today. I do not want to presume on your hospitality, but I also do not know what my position is here." Harrison accepted the coffee gratefully, taking a sip before answering. "Your position is as William's intended bride, which means you're a guest until his sister arrives and the legal matters are settled. Beyond that, I can't rightly say. The ranch will likely go to his sister, Sarah. She's married to a banker in Sacramento, has no interest in ranching herself. She'll probably sell the place. And what will happen to you and the other workers? We'll find other work. Always need good ranch hands in Nevada." Harrison shrugged, but Catherine could see a tightness around his eyes that suggested the prospect bothered him more than he let on. "I've been here 5 years, since I was 21. Built this place up with William from not much more than scrubland, but that's the way of things." Catherine sipped her own coffee, thinking. "Harrison, may I ask you something personal, I suppose? Why did you not try to find a place of your own? You clearly know ranching well. Why continue to work for someone else?" Harrison looked down into his cup, a rueful expression crossing his face. "Money, mostly. Takes capital to start a ranch, buy land and stock. I've been saving my wages, but it's slow going. Figured I had time." He met her eyes again. "Guess that shows the danger of thinking you've got all the time in the world." Before Catherine could respond, they heard a commotion from outside, raised voices and the sound of horses. Harrison set down his cup and moved to the window, his body tensing. "Trouble?" Catherine asked. "Maybe. That's Jack Donovan's voice. He owns the spread east of here, been trying to buy William out for the past 2 years. Harrison opened the door and stepped onto the porch, and Catherine followed, curious despite her apprehension. 3 men on horseback had ridden into the yard. The one in front was perhaps 40, well-dressed in a way that spoke of money, with a neatly trimmed beard and expensive boots. The 2 men flanking him had the hard look of hired guns. "Oakes," the well-dressed man said, not bothering to dismount. "I heard about William's passing. Tragic business." "Mr. Donovan." Harrison's voice was carefully neutral. "What brings you out here?" Donovan's eyes shifted to Catherine, and she felt them rake over her with uncomfortable intensity. "And who might this be, Miss Catherine Grace?" Harrison said before she could answer. "William's intended bride." "Ah, yes, the mail-order bride from back east. I had heard she was coming." Donovan smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "My condolences on your loss, Miss Grace. You came a long way for nothing, it seems." Catherine lifted her chin, refusing to be cowed. "Mr. Patterson's death is a tragedy, Mr. Donovan. I am grateful to have a place to stay while arrangements are made." "Naturally, naturally." Donovan turned his attention back to Harrison. "I assume William's sister will be handling the estate. When she's ready to sell, I want first offer on this land. It adjoins mine, and I'm willing to pay a fair price. I'm sure Sarah will consider all offers when the time comes," Harrison said evenly. See that she knows I'm serious. I've been patient, but my patience has limits." Donovan's smile turned sharp. "And Oaks, you might want to start thinking about your own future. I'm always looking for experienced hands, though I pay what a man is worth, not charity wages." Harrison's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. "I'll keep that in mind." After Donovan and his men rode off, Harrison stood on the porch for a long moment, staring after them. "That man makes my skin crawl," Catherine said quietly. "You've got good instincts. Jack Donovan is a snake, but a snake with money and influence. He's been buying up land around Unionville for years, squeezing out the smaller ranchers." Harrison turned back to her. "William refused to sell on principle, said a man should be able to keep what he builds with his own hands." "I can respect that," Catherine said. She thought of the tiny mirror, the one thing that was truly hers, and understood the importance of holding on to what mattered. The next few days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Catherine occupied herself with the house, cleaning and cooking, finding comfort in the familiar domestic tasks. Harrison came by each morning and evening to check on her, always polite and respectful but increasingly comfortable in her presence. They talked while she prepared meals, about the ranch and the land, about his life before Nevada and hers before Unionville. Catherine learned that Harrison had grown up in Missouri, the youngest of 6 children. His father had been a farmer who lost everything in the financial panic of 1857, and Harrison had headed west at 18 to make his own fortune. He had worked a dozen different jobs before finding his place on William's ranch, and he spoke of the land with a passion that made Catherine understand why the prospect of losing it pained him. For his part, Harrison was a good listener, drawing out stories of Catherine's childhood that she rarely shared. She told him about her mother, about the mirror and what it meant to her. She described the orphanage with its cold halls and colder caretakers, the years of working in houses where she was invisible, unless she made a mistake. "That's no kind of life for anyone," Harrison said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and purple. "You deserved better." "We do not always get what we deserve," Catherine replied, "but we make the best of what we have." "Is that why you answered William's advertisement, making the best of things?" Catherine considered the question carefully. "Partly. But also I wanted to choose something for myself, rather than just accepting what was chosen for me. Even if it meant marrying a stranger, at least it was my decision." Harrison was quiet for a moment, then said, "I can understand that, wanting to be master of your own fate. And yet here I am, still waiting to see what fate has in store," Catherine said with a small laugh that held little humor. "Catherine." Harrison turned to look at her, his expression serious in the fading light. "When Sarah arrives and settles the estate, you don't have to leave right away. You could stay in Unionville, find work in town maybe. Mrs. Chen, who runs the boarding house, is always looking for help, and she's fair and kind." "Are you trying to get rid of me, Harrison Oaks?" Catherine asked, surprised to find herself teasing him. A flush crept up his neck. "No, I just meant that you have options. You don't have to go back to Boston if you don't want to." Before Catherine could respond, one of the ranch hands came running up from the barn, a young man named Tommy who could not have been more than 19. "Harrison, we've got a problem. Some of the fence on the east boundary is down and I found tracks. Looks like someone cut the wire deliberate." Harrison was on his feet immediately. "How many cattle got through?" "Can't say for sure in this light, but could be a dozen or more." "Damn it." Harrison grabbed his hat from where it hung by the door. "Tommy, get the others. We need to ride out now before those cattle wander too far." He looked at Catherine. "I'm sorry, I have to go deal with this." "Of course," Catherine said, standing as well. "Is there anything I can do?" Just stay inside with the door locked until we get back. Could be nothing, or could be rustlers hoping to take advantage of the situation with William gone. Harrison's eyes were hard with anger. Either way, we'll sort it out. Catherine watched from the porch as Harrison and 3 other ranch hands rode out into the gathering darkness, and then she went inside and locked the door as instructed. She tried to distract herself with mending, but her mind kept wandering to Harrison and the men riding into potential danger. It was past midnight when she finally heard horses returning. Catherine rushed to the window and saw Harrison dismounting in the yard, and relief flooded through her. She opened the door and stepped onto the porch. "Did you find them?" she called. Harrison looked up, and even in the dim moonlight she could see the exhaustion on his face. "Most of them. Lost 2, probably driven off to be sold quick before we could track them. But we mended the fence and got the rest secured. Are you all right? Just tired?" He climbed the porch steps slowly, favoring his left side slightly. "Took a spill chasing down a stubborn heifer. I'm getting too old for this." Catherine smiled despite her worry. "You are all of 26, Harrison. Hardly ancient. Feel ancient right about now." He sank down onto the porch step with a groan. "I should head to the bunkhouse, let you get some sleep." Instead of going inside, Catherine sat down beside him on the step. Was it rustlers? Hard to say. Could have been Donovan's men trying to make trouble or just opportunists. Either way, I've got the hands taking shifts watching the herd for the next few nights. Harrison rolled his shoulders, trying to work out the stiffness. "I'm sorry about all this. This should not be your concern." "Why should it not be? I am living here, eating food from this ranch." "That makes it my concern, too." Catherine surprised herself with the fierceness in her voice. "Besides, you have been nothing but kind to me. Let me at least worry about whether you get trampled by cattle." Harrison turned to look at her, and something in his expression made Catherine's breath catch. They were sitting close enough that she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes, close enough that she was aware of the warmth radiating from his body in the cool night air. "Catherine," he said softly, "I need to tell you something." Her heart began to beat faster. "What is it?" "I know the timing is terrible, and I know you came here to marry William, and Lord knows you are dealing with enough without me adding to your troubles." Harrison took a breath. "But I can't stop thinking about you. From the moment I saw you step off that stagecoach, looking so brave and scared all at once, I have not been able to get you out of my head. And these past few days, talking with you, being around you, it has only gotten worse." Catherine felt as if all the air had been drawn from her lungs. "Harrison, I know I have no right to say any of this. I'm just a ranch hand with nothing to offer you. But if things were different, if circumstances were different, I would count myself the luckiest man alive to court you proper." He stood abruptly, as if embarrassed by his confession. "I should not have said anything. I am sorry." "Wait." Catherine stood too, her hand reaching out to catch his arm. "Please don't apologize." Harrison froze, looking down at where her fingers gripped his sleeve. "Catherine, I meant what I said. I would never presume to take advantage of your situation." "I know that." Catherine took a breath, gathering her courage. "Harrison, I barely knew William Patterson. I was prepared to marry him because it represented security and a chance at a different life. But in the few days I have known you, I have felt more comfortable, more myself than I have in years. You make me laugh. You make me feel safe. You make me feel seen." His hand came up to cover hers where it rested on his arm. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that if circumstances were different, I would be honored to have you court me." She met his eyes. "But circumstances are what they are, and we must be practical. We both know that when Sarah arrives, everything will change." "Not everything," Harrison said firmly. "How I feel about you will not change. Circumstances be damned." Before Catherine could respond, He pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other under the Nevada stars, and Catherine thought that perhaps fate had brought her to Unionville for a reason after all, just not the one she had expected. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of work and stolen moments. Harrison taught Catherine to ride, laughing when she bounced awkwardly in the saddle at first but patient as she learned. They rode out to check on the herd together, and Harrison showed her the boundaries of the ranch, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of his years working the land. In turn, Catherine found ways to make herself useful beyond just keeping house. She proved to have a good head for figures and helped Harrison go through William's account books, organizing receipts and tallying expenses. She discovered that the ranch was profitable but not wealthy, bringing in enough to pay the hands and maintain the property with a modest surplus. William was saving to expand the herd, Harrison explained as they pored over the ledgers one afternoon. He wanted to buy breeding stock from California, improve the bloodlines. That's what most of this surplus was for. How much would it take to start a small ranch of your own? Catherine asked. Harrison looked up from the books, surprised. Why do you ask? Curiosity. You said you had been saving. How close are you to having enough? Not very, Harrison admitted. Land around here is expensive, especially with Donovan buying up everything he can. And that's just for the land. Stock, buildings, equipment, all of that takes capital I don't have. I'd need at least 3 or 4 more years of saving, probably more. Catherine bit her lip, thinking. An idea had been forming in her mind, one that seemed both foolish and perfectly logical, but she needed more information before she could give it voice. That evening, as she prepared supper, Catherine found her thoughts drifting to the tiny mirror still sitting on the mantel. She picked it up, studying her reflection in the tarnished silver. What would her mother think of her now, falling in love with a cowboy she had known less than a month? But then, her mother had eloped with her father against her family's wishes, choosing love over security. Perhaps this inclination toward rash, romantic decisions ran in the blood. I am going to trust my heart, Catherine said softly to her reflection. I hope I am not making a terrible mistake. The next morning, Catherine asked Harrison to take her into Unionville. She needed to speak with a lawyer, she said, about her legal standing in William's estate. Harrison looked puzzled but agreed, and they made the 5-mile journey to town in his wagon. Unionville was busier than Catherine remembered from her arrival, the main street crowded with wagons and riders. Harrison helped her down in front of a building marked Bartholomew Rice, attorney at law, and offered to wait with the wagon, but Catherine shook her head. This may take some time. Why don't you see to your errands, and I will meet you back here in an hour. Inside, the lawyer's office was cramped but tidy, papers organized in neat stacks on every available surface. Bartholomew Rice himself was a middle-aged man with spectacles perched on his nose and ink stains on his fingers. "Miss Grace," he said, rising to greet her. "I heard about your arrival and William's unfortunate passing. My condolences. Thank you, Mr. Rice." Catherine took the chair he offered. "I've come to ask about my legal position. I was contracted to marry Mr. Patterson, but he died before the marriage could take place. Do I have any claim on his estate?" Rice steepled his fingers, considering. "Legally, no. You were engaged but not married, which means you have no legal standing as a widow or inheritor. William's estate will pass to his next of kin, which in this case is his sister Sarah." Catherine had expected as much, but the confirmation still stung. "I see. And if Sarah chooses to sell the ranch, the proceeds would be entirely hers." "Correct. Unless William left a will specifying otherwise, but to my knowledge he did not." Rice leaned forward. Miss Grace, if you are concerned about your immediate circumstances, I should tell you that Sarah Patterson is not an unreasonable woman. I have corresponded with her regarding the estate, and she mentioned providing you with funds for your return to Boston, as well as a small sum in recognition of your trouble and expense in coming here. That is generous of her, Catherine said, but I am not interested in charity. Mr. Rice, I have a different question for you. If someone wished to purchase the Patterson Ranch, how would they go about making an offer? Rice's eyebrows rose. You are interested in purchasing the property yourself? Perhaps. It would depend on the price and on whether I could secure the necessary funds. Catherine met his eyes steadily. Can you tell me what you think Sarah might accept for it? Rice shuffled through papers on his desk, producing a folder. William had the property appraised last year for insurance purposes. The land, buildings, and equipment were valued at approximately $8,000. The livestock would add another $2,000 or so. Sarah has indicated she wants to settle matters quickly, so she might accept less than the full appraised value, say $9,000 for everything. $9,000. It might as well have been $9 million for all that Catherine possessed. But she thanked the lawyer for his time and left the office with her mind racing. Harrison was waiting by the wagon, and he helped her up onto the seat with a questioning look. Did you get the answers you needed? Some of them, Catherine said. Harrison, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly without worrying about my feelings. All right, he said slowly. If you could buy the Patterson Ranch, would you? Harrison's hands tightened on the reins. Catherine, what are you planning? Just answer the question, please. He was quiet for a long moment, guiding the wagon through Unionville's crowded streets. Finally, he said, Yes. If I could buy it, I would in a heartbeat. That ranch has been my life for 5 years. I know every acre, every water source, every shelter where cattle gather in a storm. William and I built it together, and the thought of watching Donovan or some other stranger take it over makes me sick. And if I could find a way to make that happen, to get you that ranch, would you want it? Harrison pulled the wagon to a stop right in the middle of the road, turning to stare at her. Catherine, what are you talking about? There's no way to make that happen. I don't have $9,000 and I'm not going to have it. But I might, Catherine said. She reached into her bag and withdrew a folded letter, one she had brought with her from Boston. This is from my mother's brother, my Uncle Silas. I have not seen him since I was 7 years old, shortly after my mother died. He wanted to take me in, but his wife refused. She did not want the burden of raising another woman's child. Harrison took the letter, scanning its contents with a frown. Catherine, this is 15 years old. I know. But he was a banker, a successful one. He may still be, for all I know. This letter says that if I ever needed help, I should contact him. Catherine took a shaky breath. I never did because I was too proud, too angry that he sent me away. But now I am thinking that pride is a luxury I cannot afford. You would contact him now, after all this time. If it meant keeping the ranch, keeping our life here, yes. Catherine gripped his hand. Harrison, I came to Nevada looking for a home and a future. I found both, just not in the way I expected. This ranch could be that home if we are brave enough to fight for it. Harrison looked at her with an expression that was equal parts wonder and concern. Catherine, even if your uncle agreed to loan you the money, and that's a big if after 15 years of no contact, you would be taking on an enormous debt. And for what? A ranch that might fail, a life that's harder than anything you have known. For you, Catherine said simply. For us. For the chance to build something that belongs to us that no one can take away. Harrison pulled her into his arms right there in the middle of the street, kissing her with a passion that made Catherine's toes curl in her boots. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "You are the bravest, most foolish, most wonderful woman I have ever met," he said. "If you are really willing to do this, to take this risk, then I am with you all the way. But Catherine, we have to be realistic. Even if your uncle loans you the money, Sarah may not want to sell to us. And there's Donovan to consider. He will not take kindly to being outbid. Then we will deal with each obstacle as it comes," Catherine said firmly. "But we have to try, Harrison. I did not come all this way to give up now." That evening, Catherine sat down at William's desk and composed a letter to her uncle Silas. She explained her situation honestly, holding back nothing about her engagement to William or his death, about Harrison and the ranch and her desperate hope to build a life here. She asked for a loan of $9,000, offering to repay it with interest over whatever term he deemed reasonable. "I know I have no right to ask this of you," she wrote. "We have not spoken in 15 years, and for all I know, you may have long since forgotten the little niece you tried to help so long ago. But I am asking anyway, because I have learned that sometimes we must be bold enough to ask for what we need, even when the answer might be no. If you can help me, I will be forever grateful. If you cannot, I will understand and will not trouble you again." She sealed the letter and posted it the next day, knowing it would take weeks to reach Boston and weeks more to receive a reply, if there was one at all. In the meantime, Catherine and Harrison continued with the work of running the ranch, settling into a partnership that felt as natural as breathing. Sarah Patterson arrived 3 weeks after Catherine had posted her letter. She was a handsome woman in her late 40s, dressed in expensive traveling clothes and clearly out of her element on the dusty Nevada ranch. Catherine greeted her with tea and fresh bread, doing her best to make William's sister feel welcome. "You must be the mail-order bride," Sarah said, studying Catherine with sharp eyes. "I am sorry my brother's death put you in such an awkward position, Miss Grace. Please call me Catherine. And I am the one who is sorry for your loss. Everyone speaks very highly of William." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "He was a good man, my little brother, even if I thought he was crazy for coming out here to chase cows across the desert. But he was happy, and that counted for something." She looked around the house with a mixture of affection and sadness. "I suppose I should get down to business. My lawyer, Mr. Rice, has explained the situation. I need to sell this property and settle William's affairs so I can return to Sacramento. My husband has already been very patient with my absence." "I understand completely," Catherine said. "Mrs. Patterson, may I ask if you have already accepted an offer on the property? Call me Sarah, please. And no, not yet. Jack Donovan has been quite persistent, making increasingly generous offers, but something about that man rubs me the wrong way." Sarah sipped her tea. "Why do you ask?" Catherine took a breath. "Because I would like to make an offer myself." Sarah nearly choked on her tea. But I thought you had no means. That is why you answered William's advertisement, is it not?" "That is true, but circumstances may have changed." "I have written to my uncle requesting a loan. If he agrees, I would like to purchase the ranch." "But why on earth would you want to?" Sarah looked genuinely baffled. "You have been here mere weeks. You have no experience with ranching." "No, but Harrison Oakes does. He knows this ranch better than anyone, and he is willing to stay on and run it if I can secure the property." Catherine leaned forward. "Sarah, I know this must sound mad, but I came to Nevada looking for a home and I found one here. Not with William, though I am sorry I never had the chance to know him, but with the land and the life, and yes, with Harrison. If my uncle agrees to loan me the funds, I am prepared to offer $9,000 for the property, stock included." Sarah set down her teacup, studying Catherine with new interest. $9,000 is a fair price, exactly what Mr. Rice suggested. But Catherine, do you understand what you are taking on? This is not like running a household in Boston. Ranching is hard, often dangerous work. There will be droughts and harsh winters, cattle die, markets fluctuate. You could lose everything. I know, Catherine said, but I could also build something wonderful, and I would rather fail trying to create my own life than succeed at living someone else's. A slow smile spread across Sarah's face. You remind me of William when he first announced he was heading west. Everyone told him he was crazy, that he would fail within a year, but he was determined to do it his way. She stood, extending her hand to Catherine. If your uncle comes through with that loan, Miss Grace, you have a deal. I would much rather sell to you and Harrison than to that snake Donovan. Catherine shook her hand, hope and fear warring in her chest. Thank you, Sarah. I will not disappoint you. Sarah stayed on the ranch for another week, settling legal matters and going through William's personal effects. In the evenings, she shared stories about her brother, painting a picture of a kind, stubborn, optimistic man who had died doing what he loved. Catherine found herself genuinely grieving for the man she had never met, even as she fell deeper in love with Harrison. Harrison, for his part, was cautiously optimistic about their plan. He showed Sarah the account books and explained his ideas for expanding the operation, breeding better stock and improving the grazing lands. Sarah listened with interest, and Catherine could see her warming to the idea of the ranch continuing under Harrison's stewardship, rather than being absorbed into Donovan's empire. The week after Sarah returned to Sacramento, two things happened. First, Jack Donovan arrived at the ranch with an increased offer, $10,000 cash for the property. Harrison sent him away curtly, explaining that the ranch was no longer available. Donovan's face had darkened with anger, and he left with a threat hanging in the air. You are making a mistake, Oakes. I always get what I want, one way or another. The second thing was that a letter arrived from Boston. Catherine's hands shook as she opened it, Harrison standing close beside her in silent support. Inside was a single page in her uncle's familiar handwriting, and a bank draft that made her gasp. My dearest Catherine, the letter read, I cannot tell you how overjoyed I was to receive your letter after all these years. I have thought of you often and regretted deeply my inability to provide you a home when you needed one. My wife has since passed, God rest her soul, and I am an old man now with more money than I know what to do with and no children to leave it to. You are my only living relative, and it would be my greatest pleasure to help you now. Please find enclosed a bank draft for $10,000. This is not a loan, my dear, but a gift. Use it to build the life you deserve. I only wish I could see you settled and happy. Write to me when you can and let me know how you fare. Your loving Uncle Silas. Catherine read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. Harrison wrapped his arms around her, and she buried her face in his chest, overwhelmed with gratitude and relief and the sheer impossibility of it all. 10,000, Harrison said wonderingly. Catherine, this is enough to buy the ranch and have money left over for improvements, expansion. My uncle gave me a home after all, Catherine whispered, just 15 years late. They traveled to Unionville the next day to deposit the bank draft and begin the process of purchasing the ranch. Mr. Rice drew up the paperwork, and Sarah, who had waited in Sacramento for word, returned to finalize the sale. Within 2 weeks, Catherine Grace was the official owner of the Patterson Ranch, all 800 acres of it, plus livestock, equipment, and buildings. Harrison stood beside her as Mr. Rice handed over the deed, his hand warm and steady in hers. Congratulations, Miss Grace, the lawyer said. You are now a landowner. That night, as they returned to the ranch that was now hers, Catherine felt the weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders. She owned land, cattle, and a business she barely knew how to run. But she also had Harrison, and together they would figure it out. "We should get married," Harrison said as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. "That is, if you will have me. I know I have nothing to offer you that you don't already have now, but Catherine, I love you. I want to build this life with you as your husband, not just your ranch foreman." Catherine turned to him, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Harrison Oakes, are you proposing to me? I suppose I am, though I am making a mess of it." Harrison slid off the porch step and onto one knee, taking her hand in both of his. "Catherine Grace, you are the bravest, smartest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. You came into my life like a whirlwind and turned everything upside down, and I cannot imagine facing another day without you. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Catherine said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Harrison stood and kissed her, and Catherine felt the last piece of her new life click into place. They were married a week later in a simple ceremony at the Unionville church, with Sarah standing as Catherine's witness and Tommy and the other ranch hands attending. Catherine wore a simple blue dress she had brought from Boston, and she carried the tiny mirror in her pocket for luck. Before the ceremony, she looked into it one last time as a single woman, remembering her mother and the long road that had brought her here. "I found my home, Mama," she whispered. "I found my love." Harrison was waiting for her at the altar, looking handsome and nervous in a new shirt he had bought specially for the occasion. When the preacher asked if he took Catherine to be his lawfully wedded wife, Harrison's voice rang out clear and strong, "I do." And when it was Catherine's turn, she looked into Harrison's storm-cloud eyes and said the same, "I do." That night, in the house that was now theirs, Harrison built a fire in the fireplace while Catherine unpacked her few belongings, making room for Harrison's things alongside hers. As she worked, Harrison noticed the tiny mirror still sitting on the mantel. "Is this the mirror you told me about?" he asked, picking it up carefully. "The one from your mother?" "Yes, I have had it since I was 5 years old. It is not worth anything, but it is precious to me." Harrison turned the mirror over in his hands, studying it thoughtfully. Then he walked to the eastern window, the one that caught the morning sun. "May I?" "Of course." Using a small nail and his careful hands, Harrison hung the mirror on the wall beside the window, positioning it so the morning light would catch its surface and send reflected brightness dancing across the room. "There," he said with satisfaction. "Now every morning when the sun comes up, you will see your mirror catching the light, and you will remember that you are loved." Catherine crossed the room to him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her head against his chest. "I love you, Harrison Oakes." "I love you too, Catherine Oakes." He tilted her chin up and kissed her softly. "Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy with more dreams than sense. Thank you for seeing me, really seeing me when I needed it most." That night, they made love for the first time as husband and wife, learning each other's bodies with tenderness and passion. Harrison was gentle but fierce, cherishing Catherine with his hands and mouth and body until she was gasping his name. Catherine discovered a boldness in herself she had not known existed, touching and exploring Harrison with wonder and growing confidence. They came together in a rush of heat and joy, and afterward lay tangled in each other's arms, hearts beating in sync. The months that followed were not easy, but they were good. Catherine threw herself into learning everything she could about ranching, riding out with Harrison to check on the herd, helping with the branding and castrating of calves in the spring, sitting in on meetings with buyers. She had a good head for business, and Harrison valued her input on decisions about the ranch's future. They used the remaining money from Uncle Silas to buy breeding stock from California, just as William had planned, improving their herd's bloodlines. They also invested in better fencing and hired 2 additional hands to help with the increased workload. Jack Donovan did not give up easily. He continued to make trouble where he could, trying to undercut their prices when they went to sell cattle, spreading rumors in town that Harrison was mismanaging the ranch. But Catherine and Harrison held firm, running their operation with integrity and building a reputation for quality stock and fair dealing. In the second spring of their marriage, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. She told Harrison one morning as they stood together by the eastern window, watching the sunlight catch in her mother's mirror and scatter brightness across the room. "We are going to have a baby," she said simply. Harrison's face went through a dozen emotions in as many seconds before settling on pure joy. He picked Catherine up and spun her around, laughing like a boy. "A baby, Catherine, we are going to have a baby." "Put me down, you fool," Catherine said, laughing too. "You will make me dizzy." Harrison set her down carefully, then dropped to his knees and pressed his ear to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your papa. I just want you to know that you are already the most loved baby in Nevada, possibly the world." Catherine ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed with love for this man who had become her whole world. "We should think about names. If it is a girl, we should name her after your mother," Harrison said, looking up at her. "What was her name?" "Anne. Her name was Anne." "Anne Oakes." "That is a good, strong name." Harrison stood, pulling Catherine into his arms. "And if it is a boy, I was thinking Thomas, after your father." Harrison's eyes grew bright with unshed tears. "He would have liked that. He would have liked you, Catherine. You are everything he always told me to look for in a wife. Strong, smart, not afraid of hard work." Catherine gave birth to a son that November, a healthy baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. They named him Thomas Harrison Oakes, and he was welcomed into the world by his parents and every hand on the ranch, all of whom took turns holding the tiny boy and marveling at the miracle of new life. Catherine proved to be a natural mother, nursing Thomas while simultaneously reviewing account books, making decisions about the ranch while the baby slept against her shoulder. Harrison was a devoted father, walking the floor with Thomas when he was fussy, singing him cowboy ballads in his off-key voice until the baby fell asleep. 2 years later, Catherine gave birth to a daughter they named Anne, and their family felt complete. The ranch prospered under their careful management, growing from a modest operation to one of the most successful in the region. They added a room onto the house for the children and built a new barn to house their expanded herd. Jack Donovan eventually gave up trying to buy them out, turning his attention to other acquisitions. He and Harrison reached an uneasy truce, acknowledging each other curtly when they encountered each other in town, but otherwise keeping their distance. Sarah visited once a year, delighting in her nephew and niece and marveling at the success Catherine and Harrison had built. She always made a point of visiting William's grave in the Unionville cemetery, and Catherine always went with her, bringing flowers and saying a quiet thank you to the man whose death had inadvertently brought her to Nevada and to Harrison. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Harrison surprised Catherine with a gift. It was a new frame for her mother's mirror, crafted from silver with delicate engravings of desert flowers along the border. "I know the mirror is perfect as it is," Harrison said as he helped Catherine remove the old mirror from its place by the window and settle it into the new frame. "But I wanted to honor it properly, this little piece of glass that has been with you through everything." Catherine traced the engravings with her finger, tears in her eyes. "It is beautiful, Harrison. Thank you." They hung the newly framed mirror back in its place by the eastern window, and the next morning when the sun rose, it caught the silver frame and sent even more light dancing across the room. Little Thomas, now 4 years old, laughed and chased the reflected light across the floor while 2-year-old Anne clapped her hands in delight. "Look, Mama," Thomas said. "The mirror is making magic." Catherine caught Harrison's eye across the room, and they shared a smile full of love and contentment and gratitude for the life they had built together. "Yes, sweetheart," Catherine said, scooping up her son and settling Anne on her hip. "It certainly is." The years continued to pass, marked by seasons and growth and the steady accumulation of joy. Catherine and Harrison added 3 more children to their family over the next decade, 2 more sons and another daughter. The ranch continued to thrive, becoming known throughout Nevada for its quality cattle and fair business practices. Catherine never forgot her humble beginnings or the kindness that had brought her to this life. She made it a point to hire hands who needed a second chance, young men who had made mistakes but wanted to work hard and build something better. She and Harrison paid fair wages and treated their workers with respect, creating a loyal crew that stayed with the ranch year after year. Tommy, the young hand who had been there since the beginning, eventually married a girl from town and built a house on a corner of the ranch that Catherine and Harrison gave him as a wedding present. He became Harrison's right-hand man, and his children grew up playing with the Oaks children, running wild across the Nevada desert and learning to ride before they could properly walk. Uncle Silas lived to see Catherine's success, corresponding with her regularly until his death when Catherine was 35. He left her his entire estate, another substantial sum that Catherine used to establish a fund for orphan children in Nevada, ensuring that other girls and boys without families would have opportunities she had been denied. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Catherine and Harrison took a rare day away from the ranch, riding out to a high meadow they had discovered years earlier. They spread a blanket under a cottonwood tree and shared a picnic lunch, talking and laughing and remembering their journey together. "Do you ever regret it?" Harrison asked, lying back on the blanket with his head in Catherine's lap. "Coming all the way to Nevada, marrying a cowboy, taking on all this hard work." Catherine looked down at her husband, his face weathered by sun and wind but still achingly handsome to her eyes. His dark hair was threaded with silver now, and there were lines around his eyes from years of squinting against the desert sun, but he was still her Harrison, the man who had seen her when she felt invisible, who had loved her when she felt unlovable. "Never," Catherine said firmly. "Not for a single moment. This life, this family, this ranch, it is everything I never knew I wanted but needed desperately." "I think about that day you arrived sometimes," Harrison said. "How I stood by the hitching post watching you step down from that stagecoach, and I thought you were the bravest, most beautiful thing I had ever seen. And then I thought about William and how lucky he was, and I was so jealous I could barely see straight." Catherine laughed. "You never told me that." "Well, I was hardly going to confess to lusting after my boss's mail-order bride, was I?" Harrison caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "But I thank God every day that you came here, Catherine. You made my life better in every possible way." "We made each other better," Catherine corrected. "That is what love does." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the wind in the cottonwood leaves and the distant sound of cattle lowing. Finally, Harrison sat up and pulled something from his pocket. "I have something for you," he said. "Another anniversary present." He handed Catherine a small leather pouch, and when she opened it, a delicate gold chain spilled into her palm. Attached to the chain was a locket, and when Catherine opened it, she found 2 tiny photographs inside. One was of her mother, the picture Catherine had treasured for years, carefully copied and reduced to fit the locket. The other was of Harrison on their wedding day. "So you can carry us both with you," Harrison said softly. "The woman who gave you life and taught you love, and the man who loves you with everything he has." Catherine fastened the locket around her neck, feeling its slight weight settle against her heart. "I love you, Harrison Oakes, today and every day for the rest of my life." "And I love you, Catherine Oakes. Thank you for choosing me, for choosing this life, for being brave enough to build something beautiful out of tragedy and chance." They made love there in the high meadow, with the same passion and tenderness that had always characterized their union. Afterward, they lay wrapped in each other's arms, watching clouds drift across the brilliant blue Nevada sky. When they returned to the ranch that evening, they found their children waiting for them on the porch, ranging in age from 17-year-old Thomas down to 7-year-old Margaret. The oldest ones had prepared supper, and the youngest had picked wildflowers to decorate the table. "Happy anniversary, Mama and Papa," they chorused as Catherine and Harrison climbed down from their horses. That night, gathered around the table with their children, Catherine felt a profound sense of contentment wash over her. This was what she had been searching for all those years ago when she answered William Patterson's advertisement, this sense of belonging and purpose and love. After the children had gone to bed, Catherine and Harrison stood together by the eastern window, looking at the mirror that had been witness to their entire life together. The mirror that Catherine had carried since childhood, that Harrison had hung to catch the morning light, was now surrounded by photographs of their children, their ranch, their life. "You remember what you said to me that first night?" Catherine asked. "When you told me how you felt?" "I said a lot of things that night," Harrison replied, slipping his arms around her waist from behind and resting his chin on her shoulder. "You said that if circumstances were different, you would count yourself the luckiest man alive to court me." "I remember." Catherine turned in his arms to face him. "I want you to know that I count myself the luckiest woman alive to have found you, to have built this life with you. You gave me everything I ever wanted, Harrison. A home, a family, a purpose, and most of all, love." Harrison kissed her tenderly. "We gave each other all of those things, my love. We were both brave enough to reach for what we wanted, even when it seemed impossible." As they stood there in the house they had built together, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life, Catherine thought about the scared young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach 20 years earlier with nothing but a tiny mirror and desperate hope. That woman would scarcely recognize the confident rancher and mother Catherine had become. But when she looked in the mirror the next morning, watching the sun catch its surface and scatter light across the room just as it had every morning for 2 decades, Catherine saw the through line connecting that frightened girl to the woman she was now. The mirror had been a constant, a reminder of where she came from and who she was, even as everything else in her life transformed. The years continued their steady march forward. Thomas grew into a fine young man who loved ranching as much as his father did, eventually taking over more and more of the daily operations. He married a schoolteacher from Unionville, a smart, capable woman named Elizabeth, and they built a house on the ranch and started their own family. Anne became a talented artist, painting landscapes of the Nevada desert that captured its harsh beauty in ways that took Catherine's breath away. She moved to San Francisco to study art, but came home often, and she always painted at least one piece featuring her mother's mirror catching the morning light. The other children found their own paths, some staying close to the ranch and others venturing out into the wider world, but all of them carrying with them the values Catherine and Harrison had instilled through example and love. Catherine and Harrison grew old together gracefully, their love deepening with each passing year. They spent their mornings drinking coffee on the porch, watching the sun rise over land they had worked together for decades. They spent their evenings in the rocking chairs by the fireplace, Harrison reading aloud while Catherine mended or knitted, comfortable in the silence between words. When Catherine was 65, Harrison fell ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. For 2 terrifying weeks, Catherine barely left his side, nursing him with the same fierce determination she had brought to every challenge in her life. She talked to him constantly, even when he was too fevered to respond, reminding him of their life together and all the reasons he needed to fight. "You cannot leave me yet, Harrison Oakes," she said one night, her voice breaking. "We have grandchildren to spoil and a ranch to run, and I still need you. I will always need you." Harrison pulled through, though it took him months to fully recover his strength. During his convalescence, he spent hours looking through the photographs that documented their life, touching each one tenderly and remembering. "I have had a good life," he told Catherine one afternoon. "Better than I ever dreamed possible when I was just a ranch hand with empty pockets and big dreams." "We have had a good life," Catherine corrected, taking his hand. "And we are not done yet. I expect at least another 20 years out of you, Harrison Oakes." He laughed, the sound still warming Catherine's heart even after all these years. "I will do my best, Mrs. Oakes. For you, I will always do my best." They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and friends, a gathering that filled the ranch house to bursting. Harrison made a toast, his voice still strong despite his recent illness. 40 years ago, I married the most remarkable woman in Nevada, possibly the world. She was brave enough to cross a continent for a new life, brave enough to take a chance on a cowboy with nothing to offer but love, and brave enough to build an empire from dust and determination. Catherine, you have been my partner, my best friend, and the great love of my life. Here is to 40 more years. I will drink to that, Catherine said, raising her own glass. Though you had better take good care of yourself if you expect to make it another 40 years, old man. The gathering erupted in laughter, and Catherine looked around at all the faces she loved, all the lives that had sprung from her decision to answer William Patterson's advertisement so many decades ago. It was strange to think how differently things might have turned out, how close she had come to never finding this place, this life, this love. That night, after the guests had gone home and the house was quiet again, Catherine stood by the eastern window looking at her mother's mirror. It was dark now, but she knew that when morning came, the sun would catch its surface again, just as it had every morning for more than 40 years. Harrison came to stand beside her, slipping his arm around her waist in the familiar gesture that never failed to make Catherine feel cherished and safe. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything," Catherine said. "The strange path that brought me here, the life we built, all the blessings we have been given. And I am thinking about this mirror, how it has been with me through everything." "Your talisman," Harrison said, understanding as he always did. "My reminder," Catherine corrected. "That I am loved, that I belong somewhere, that I matter. My mother gave me that gift when I was 5 years old, and you have given it to me every day since we met." Harrison turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face with infinite tenderness. "And you have given it to me, Catherine. You made me believe I could be more than just a ranch hand working someone else's land. You made me a husband, a father, a rancher, a man who matters. Everything good in my life started the day you stepped off that stagecoach." They held each other in the darkness, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful that would outlast them both. Catherine lived to see her 70th birthday, still active and engaged with the ranch and her family. Harrison was 71, his body weathered by decades of hard work, but his mind still sharp, and his love for Catherine undimmed. On a spring morning much like the one when Catherine had first arrived in Nevada all those years ago, she woke before dawn and slipped out of bed without waking Harrison. She walked to the eastern window and stood waiting for the sunrise, watching for that first ray of light that would catch her mother's mirror. When it came, the light seemed brighter than usual, filling the room with a warm, golden glow. Catherine looked at her reflection in the tiny mirror, seeing the lines and silver hair of age but also seeing the young woman she had been, the scared girl with nothing but hope and a tarnished mirror. "Thank you, Mama," she whispered. "For this mirror, for the love you taught me, for giving me the strength to build the life I needed." Behind her, she heard Harrison stirring, and she turned to see him watching her from the bed with love in his eyes. "Good morning, my love," he said. "Good morning," Catherine replied, moving to sit beside him on the bed. "Another beautiful day." "They are all beautiful days with you," Harrison said, pulling her down for a kiss. And it was true, Catherine thought as she settled into her husband's arms, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. Every day with Harrison, every morning watching the light catch her mother's mirror, every moment with their family, it was all beautiful, all precious, all exactly what she had crossed a continent to find. The mirror hung in the morning light, a tiny piece of tarnished silver that had witnessed a lifetime of love, catching the sun and scattering brightness across the room where Catherine and Harrison Oakes had built their forever home, just as it would continue to do for generations to come. A testament to the brave young woman who had dared to answer an advertisement, the cowboy who had loved her, and the beautiful life they had created together in the wild heart of Nevada. Their story became a legend in Unionville, passed down through generations. The tale of the mail-order bride who arrived to find her intended dead, who fell in love with a cowboy and built a ranching empire, who carried a tiny mirror since she was 5 years old, and whose husband hung it in the morning light where it remained for the rest of their lives. A symbol of love enduring through every season and every challenge. When Catherine and Harrison finally passed, within months of each other as devoted couples often do, they were laid to rest in the Unionville cemetery beside William Patterson, the man whose death had inadvertently brought them together. Their children and grandchildren continued to run the ranch, keeping it in the family just as Catherine and Harrison had always wanted. And the mirror, that tiny piece of tarnished silver that had started it all, remained in its place by the eastern window of the ranch house, catching the morning light and scattering brightness across the room, a reminder that love can be found in the most unexpected places, that courage and hope can build empires from dust, and that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single brave step into the unknown. The ranch prospered for generations under the care of the Oakes family, each new generation adding their own chapters to the story, while honoring the legacy Catherine and Harrison had created. The mirror became a family treasure, its story told and retold, inspiring young Oakes children to be brave, to reach for what they wanted, to believe in the power of love to transform lives. Thomas and Elizabeth's children grew up hearing about their grandmother Catherine, the brave young woman from Boston who had risked everything for a chance at a new life. They learned about the tiny mirror she had carried since childhood, and about the cowboy who had loved her enough to hang it where she could see it catch the morning light every day. Anne's paintings, particularly the ones featuring the mirror, hung in galleries across the West, telling the story of her parents' love to anyone who stopped to look. In her artist's statement, she always wrote about the mirror, about what it represented to her mother and what it had come to mean to their entire family. The other Oak's children each found their own ways to honor Catherine and Harrison's legacy. One became a lawyer who fought for orphans' rights, inspired by his grandmother's difficult childhood. Another established a scholarship fund for young women seeking education, remembering how Catherine had taught herself ranching through determination and hard work. A third became a minister, dedicated to celebrating love in all its forms, having grown up witnessing the deep devotion between his grandparents. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, as Nevada changed and modernized around it, the Oaks Ranch remained a constant, a piece of the Old West preserved not in amber but in active, living tradition. The methods evolved with the times, but the core values Catherine and Harrison had established remained unchanged. Fair dealing, hard work, respect for the land and the animals, and above all, the importance of family and love. On the 50th anniversary of Catherine and Harrison's wedding, the family gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. Descendants came from across the country, some of whom had never seen the ranch, but who grew up hearing the stories. They gathered in the house where Catherine and Harrison had raised their family, and someone gave a toast standing right beside the eastern window, next to the mirror that still hung there catching the light. To Catherine and Harrison, the toast went, who taught us that love is the greatest adventure of all. The mirror caught the light as glasses were raised, scattering brightness across the faces of children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them products of one woman's courage and one man's devotion, all of them carrying forward a legacy built on love and determination in the wild heart of the American West. And every morning, as the sun rose over the Nevada desert, that tiny mirror kept its faithful vigil, catching the light and remembering, always remembering, the mail-order bride who had carried it since she was 5 years old and the cowboy who had hung it in the morning light, and the beautiful, impossible, perfect love story they had written together across the unforgiving and magnificent landscape of their lives. The end.